Cruz Arnold, Jeanette Garza Lindner, Angela Lamont Flowers, me, Audrey Momanai, Rick Campo, Rolando Martinez, Paula Mendoza, and Adam Ravon. If there are any elected officials in the audience this evening, please stand and be recognized. Thank you for being here with us tonight. Please rise for a moment of silent meditation. Please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance and the pledge to the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, one and indivisible. Thank you.
The most up-to-date list of speakers.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. At this time, we will hear from all of our registered speakers, both those who signed up to address agenda items and those who signed up for the hearing of the community. We are glad you are here and look forward to hearing from you. We'll group our speakers by format rather than specific topic, beginning with Zoom speakers and followed by in-person speakers. Public comment during school board meetings will only be available to those persons who have signed up to speak prior to the meeting time per current protocol. Verbal and other disruptions by persons during the school board meetings are not acceptable as they inhibit the board's ability to conduct business and the public's ability to observe those processes. Disruptions do not serve the interests of the students of HISD or the community. Persons who participate in such behavior will be given one warning, and if the disruptive behavior is repeated, they will be asked to leave the meeting. We have 35 registered speakers who will be limited to 1 minute per person per board policy, as we have more than 30 speakers signed up to address the board tonight. We ask that you stay on topic and refrain from naming individuals, especially students, as their identity is protected under the law, but you may name your own child. I ask that you please respect our procedures and the other speakers and end your comments promptly when your time has expired and the timer rings. If you're signed up to speak via Zoom, we must see you live with your camera on as you speak. Ms. Smith, can you please identify and admit our Zoom speakers?
Sarah Rivlin, please turn on your camera. You may begin.
Hello?
You may begin.
Hello?
Please turn on your camera so we can see you.
Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry.
Okay, you're on.
19 of the reconstituted schools are A and B rated. Do parents in those schools know that the new teachers aren't required to have any teaching experience? Even worse, Amplify, this required scripted reading curriculum, is very bad. Teachers say it's developmentally inappropriate and dry. This is an actual writing test in a second grade Amplify workbook. Why is the War of 1812 often referred to as America's Second War for Independence? In your response, describe what caused the war and Great Britain's three-part plan for defeating the United States. Some teacher quotes about Amplify. The children are so overwhelmed, they cry because they don't understand it, and the speed of the lessons doesn't allow time to go back and reteach it. There's nothing decorating the halls. I didn't want to hang worksheets in the hall. I wouldn't want my children taught this way. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker. Ms. Smith, do you have the next speaker?
Melissa Yarborough, please turn on your camera. You may begin. Just a minute, she's joining. Melissa Yarborough, please turn on your camera. You may begin.
Ma'am, you have a minute. Please go ahead.
Is it my turn? Thank you. Q is hemorrhaging teachers and staff right now. We just lost our principal this week. Mr. Miles says the changes will attract the best teachers, but they are really scaring them away. By removing our teachers and staff, you have already reached your goal, destroying our individual school community and identity so that you can copy and paste your charter model there. Our school garden, STEAM projects, Girls on the Run Club, and much more are all shriveling up with the removal of the teachers that supported them. Mr. Miles called critics of the NES fearful because the plan is new. First of all, we want to be heard, not patronized, please. Secondly, it's actually not all new. A lot of it is just sending us backwards, back to ESL instead of dual language, back to electives not being important enough to have certified teachers, basing everything on test scores, and assuming it's the teacher's fault when research has shown for years that test scores correlate to students' race and socioeconomic status, which proves, by the way, that students need more resources and support, not to lose the teachers they care about. The NES is not a new bold plan. It's full of antiquated ideas that are sending our schools backwards.
Thank you, ma'am.
Dr. Pamela Bovelin, please turn your camera on. You may begin. You may begin.
Ma'am, please go ahead. You have 1 minute. Ms. Boveland, can you hear us?
Oh, okay.
Yes, ma'am, you have a minute.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
I can hear you. Thank
Okay,
you.
please.
I'm very concerned, especially in this atmosphere of Juneteenth, when our vote is being taken and it's so many people died for us to have those votes. Hattie Mae White had to endure years of racial slurs and attacks. But more specifically to the agenda item, please do not allow the watering down of magnet programs. That's all he wants to do, is water it down. And so while other schools will maintain their quality magnet programs, the 28 schools that he's decided needs his help, which most of them do not, because all of them are Bs, then it is imperative that you not do this.
Thank you, ma'am.
Sister Mama Sonia, please turn your camera on. You may begin.
Ms. Lucas Roberts, can you hear us?
She's in, but she's not on.
Ms. Lucas Roberts, you are ready to speak. If you can please turn on your camera.
She may have stepped away. She's not. She's in the room, but she's not.
Okay. We'll move on, and if she's available later, we'll get her in. Is Ms. Moreno on?
No, that concludes our Zoom speakers.
Okay. That concludes for now our Zoom speakers. Next, we will hear from our in-person registered speakers. All speakers are assigned a number according to when they arrive to check in. We'll begin with speaker number 1, followed by number 2 and number 3, and so on. Please state your name when you begin speaking. And I think I have a list, so I'm going to try. Michelle Williams is our first speaker, I believe. Ms. Williams, thank you. You have a minute.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Michelle Williams.
No, go ahead. We'll come back to whoever. I think that was somebody on Zoom, but go ahead, please.
There's no debate that all of you all are successful individuals, so this should be easy for you all to understand. Under TEA's job description, it says that you assume all the powers of our elected board members. What I'm saying to you all today is our elected board members would never allow any superintendent to miss public comment. It sends a message of disrespect. and unprofessionalism, which I know none of you all would actually allow that at your board meeting. So I'm asking you all today to actually set expectations for him that are professional and respect our communities. Also, I've given you all packets on TIA. Please don't allow him to change our teacher evaluation. We just transitioned to TES, and it's not fair to take money from one system to another for NES schools. Educate yourself on House Bill 3, please. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker, number 2, is Christy Brewster.
Yes, I'm Christy Michelle Brewster, certified school nurse. Yep, I'm back. Back again. Last week, I heard the justification for the request for the homebound waiver, and it was said something like, to help improve special ed. Well, in the eligibility, it said special ed and regular ed. What's happening to my regular ed students? I didn't hear any justification for them. Please advise. Secondly, you already know this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Pregnancy-related services uses homebound services. We call them PRS, those of us who worked in the district. That special pop uses sometimes special ed division and regular ed. Please advise. Will they have this waiver request? Lastly, you already know this too. Community Services Schools provides homebound services for Houston ISD. Wonderful program, very needed program when it's managed appropriately. Please advise. Are we going to have services for our students? I'm concerned about all students, not just the 28 campuses who are now called the not everybody schools. I'm for everybody. So let's act like that.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Jessica Campos. Speaker number 3. Yes, ma'am, you have 1 minute, please.
I would like to acknowledge Mr. Miles. He did come outside after the media left on our protest that Thursday morning. Thank you for coming out to speak to us, Mr. Miles, but we aren't buying what you're selling. I'm really glad that we were able to get your attention and that you recognize that you made all these drastic changes without our Spanish-speaking community's approval or acknowledgement. Please stop keeping the truth from our people and putting us at the end of the line to speak. I was here last Thursday, and although I got here early, you put me in a room with a camera and a screen, and I sat and looked around, and all I saw was black and brown faces, and I realized that you used the Zoom room discipline strategy on me and my community. I've never felt so discriminated. I don't think that you did your homework before you arrived in our city. Before you came here to make these drastic changes, you would have realized that the largest portion of Houston population is Hispanic and that 35% of them are Spanish speaking as a first language. But you want to take away our dual language programs. Our community is 97% economically disadvantaged, and you want to take away our wraparound specialists.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Analia Espinoza. Ms. Espinoza? And then after her is Ms. Ruth Kravitz.
Hello, my name is Analia, and I would like to speak on behalf of the next generation. You taking our schools because they seem unfit to your eyes despite the hard work and effort put into them truly makes me believe that you see us as nothing but black and brown schools in a not-so-wealthy community. Now you're trying to take away opportunities such as magnet and bilingual classes because they seem unnecessary to you, despite them being one of the many reasons these children succeed in life. Then you will no longer tolerate bad behavior in schools, and by doing so, you put these children in classes by themselves, away from their classmates, only to look at a screen and nothing more because they were too difficult for you. I say this because I was put in a similar situation for a whole year, all because of a mental disability that the school had no tolerance for. I beg you to not make children slaves to your education system where they cannot express themselves through art or through opinion. We have a voice. Why try to change a community that has been built on teamwork and try to break it down because it's not to your liking? I hope that you finally take our voices into consideration, and by doing so, you let these dedicated teachers have their jobs back, because they are the reason my sister, who has struggled with a disability all her life, is thriving and successful in her class. They are the reason these children have been able to express themselves and just be kids. We've gone through so much painful change through these past years, especially with COVID, especially as a small community, so please do not take what we have built together away.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Ruth Kravitz, followed by Tia James Glenn, and then Susan Espinoza. Ms. Kravitz, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. My name is Ruth Kravitz. I wish Mike was here. I'm a former AP Calculus and math teacher and administrator. Student outcomes are important, but not if test scores are first and students a distant second. According to your evaluation model, principals will be evaluated. Not your evaluation model, Mike Miles, who's not here, evaluation model. Principals will be evaluated on whether their teacher evaluations align with student performance. This will force principals to evaluate teachers entirely on predicted student performance and not at all on the quality of instruction and the capacity to inspire. Students are human beings. When kids sleep 4 to a mattress, they do not need more test prep. They need 3 or 4 more mattresses. I have a friend who is the best English teacher in America. She tutors every day, teaches new English language learners, and makes learning come alive. When her students experience homelessness, hurricanes, and shootings, her scores do not always shine. At one of 4 NES schools, her principal would have to evaluate her harshly based on predicted test scores. This is wrong at every level. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Tia James Glenn. Yes, ma'am, you have 1 minute.
Okay. My name is Tia James Glenn, and I'm a current HISD parent in the North Forest feeder pattern. My daughter is a recent graduate for Pre-K4 from Farmwood Early Childhood Center. I want to stress the importance of early childhood centers in the district. With their prioritization of pre-K, it allows them to focus on education and socioeconomic learning for those kids to have those kids ready for elementary. We want to feel seen and heard. This community has yet to feel so. Many decisions were made without community involvement or visits, especially when we were shut out of meetings. It is insulting to make visits after the decisions are made, which is like a dictatorship, which I learned in my HISD high school. Clarity is the key to trust. Transportation is an issue in this district. Kids can't get the education they need if they can't get there to get it. What about kids that are hungry or have family situations? We have yet to see how that's being addressed when the school year instead of throwing money. And we're just asking for equity and education in all areas of the city.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Susan Espinoza. After Ms. Espinoza will be Courtney Revels and then Sam Smith. Ms. Espinoza, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. I am an HISD teacher of 26 years. I've taught special education all of those 26 years here in HISD. I have lived in HISD my whole entire life, and I am a taxpayer and a voter. I have block walked and I have knocked doors for my school board members. I didn't vote for none of y'all. None of y'all did I vote for, and worked hard to get you in that position. So as a voter, I do not approve of this board. Secondly, as a teacher, many things have already been brought up. Things that are going to be taken away from our children. I've worked in special ed 26 years. I know what children in need look like, and taking away things they need does not foster success.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Courtney Revels, followed by Sam Smith and then Allison Chapin. Ms. Revels, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. My name is Courtney Revels. Hey, y'all. I live in the North Forest area, like the other young lady, the Not Everybody Schools area. And I was just wanting to speak on not to approve the the remote learning, because we've suspended so much board policy as of already, this could have some unintended consequences. So suspending another policy is just not something we're in line with. Like someone said earlier, these are not decisions that our elected board would be making. And our superintendent at least faced the fire before. He had the same group of people having the same issues with our schools, just not being invested in by the state. It's always been a state issue. We deal with recapture. That means they take our money. We can afford to pay our teachers, but they're taking our money and putting it back into state revenue. So yeah, don't approve that. No more suspending board policies. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Smith, followed by Ms. Chapin, and followed by Erica Washington Phillip. Mr. Smith, thank you. You have a minute.
Good afternoon. I see Mike Ford not here today again. My question is, for the 29 schools that's in my area on the north side, y'all taking the programs out that help the kids. So my question is for you board members, when you going to grow some balls and tell Mike Miles no? Because our kids, the area I live in, our kids are underserved. Kids don't have meals at home. Their lights are off. They're sleeping on the floor. And mama, dad in jail or brother raising their kids. I'm asking you board members today, grow some balls and tell Mike Miles no.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ms. Chapin, followed by Erica Washington Phillip, and then Norma Thomas.
Good evening. My name is Allison Chapin, and I'm a teacher in HISD and a member of HFT Local 2415. I wish to address the board this evening concerning several items on the agenda. Item number 1, the budget shouldn't be approved because of the loss of wraparound services and other campus-level roles that directly service student needs, mental, physical, and educational. I find it odd that there's $2.6 million being put into instructional and school leadership, but there's only one. I'm so sorry, I got my numbers mixed up. Anyway, you shouldn't be paying the board for more chiefs than there are Indians, and that's the way the budget looks to me. And you're taking money from counseling and guidance and mental health services for students. Also, number 2, number 12, number 21 through 23. Totally against all of them. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Miss Erica Washington Phillip, followed by Norma Thomas, and then Ann Eagleton. Ms. Phillip, is Ms. Phillip here? Miss Erica Washington Phillip? No. Miss Norma Thomas? Yes, ma'am. Thank you. You have a minute.
I'm Norma Thomas. I represent the Partnership for School Improvement, formerly the Coalition of Schools in Acres Homes, where we once held charter with Houston ISD for oversight of our schools until a new leader came in with a new plan and watched all of our schools begin to struggle. I will forward information to you about our organization so that you have it before you visit Acres Homes next week. We're asking that you visit us not just to come and tell us what it is that you plan to do, but to also listen to your taxpayers and your voters, because we are intelligent enough to know what it is that our schools need in our community. We do have questions, and we hope that you will make time to answer those questions. For example, number 1, why is Highland Heights on the NES list? We meet with our principals every month, so we had no indication that Highland Heights needed to be on the NES list, and we need answers. We also want to know are you aware that some of the things that are proposed in the plan have already been done in HISD and have already failed? We would like answers. So we hope that you would come to Acres Homes with us, and please make sure Mr. Miles is present and on time. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Ann Eagleton, followed by James Wooten, and then Hector Morales. I think it's Mr. Morales. Ann Eagleton?
Hi.
Yes,
I'm very concerned with the way the meeting went last week. It was supposed to be a budget meeting. The CFO spoke for 8 minutes. Mike Miles spoke for over 2 hours. I still don't have a clue what you're passing. It's like you borrowed a page from Nancy Pelosi of you have to approve it so we can know what's in it. That is not appropriate. That is not transparency. I'd also like to talk about that setup last week. I just want you to know, why were you at 8-foot tables? Was he afraid you would have fisticuffs? I mean, it was ridiculous. You kept people out of the room so you could have a ridiculous furniture arrangement. And it made you all look small and silly. He works for you and us, not the other way around. And that the tail is wagging the dog, and make it stop. We don't want to pay for it. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is James Wooten, followed by Mr. Morales. Mr. Wooten, you have 1 minute.
Yes, my name is James Wooten. I work for HISD at the Houston Museum of Natural Science. I'm speaking to ensure that this changeover doesn't impact the program that's been serving fourth graders at the museum since about 1966. They come to our museum, they receive a learning lab experience, a planetarium show, and a guided tour of the museum. For many of these kids, it's the only chance to visit the Houston Museum of Natural Science. I don't know if anyone in here was in fourth grade and came to our museum, and they get a chance to see a planetarium show and, of course, to interact with actual museum specimens like this. These things are hard to replicate in a classroom. And we design our labs and our planetarium shows to reinforce the Texas TEACS and the HISD scope and sequence. So as you make all these changes, make sure that kids don't lose these kinds of experiences that they otherwise would never get to have, even going all the way into adulthood.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Hector Morales.
Good afternoon, Madam President, board members. My name is Hector Morales. We represent the support staff here in HISD, my Vice President, Ms. Lozano. I hope you received the two copies that I gave you guys to look at. My member who I represent was currently terminated by HISD for financial fraud, but actually it was the principal who did it. You should have received both invoices, and both invoices look exactly alike. The only difference is the one that was approved was for student program kits, which the students never received. I think if you're going to come in and try to do the right thing, then you need to look into the fraud that's being committed by some of these principals at these schools, and that needs to be looked at very thoroughly. I hope you received the two invoices that I gave you. The difference is one says student program kits, and the other one says stuffed wing meals, including 3 wings, free, fries, and a drink.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Selena Manzano, followed by Elizabeth Ortiz, and then Stefan Hester. Ms. Manzano? And is Ms. Manzano going to have...
She will need an interpreter, so I'll interpret for her.
Okay.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Selena Manzano.
Good afternoon, my name is Selena Manzano.
Soy una madre de la escuela Pew Elementary.
I'm a mother from the Pugue Elementary School.
Quisiera que este mensaje no se distorsione.
I wish that this message is not distorted.
Y los hispanos tengamos un poco más de atención.
And that Hispanics have a little bit more of an attention.
A nuestras escuelas nos están quitando a nuestros maestros, a nuestros directores y al personal de la oficina.
They are removing teachers, principals, and office personnel from our schools.
Por favor, ya no nos quiten el programa bilingüe,
Please
las
do not
clases de arte, las bibliotecas, entre otras.
Please do not remove our bilingual program, our art, our library, amongst other things.
Necesitamos a nuestros maestros, a nuestra familia Pew.
We need our teachers, we need our Pugue family.
Díganme, ¿cómo le explicamos a nuestros niños que todo su personal será distinto?
Please tell me how are we going to explain to our children that their personnel is going to be completely different.
Que ya no serán las mismas caras conocidas que los reciban todas las mañanas.
That it will not be the same faces that they know that will receive them every morning.
Queremos salvar a nuestros maestros. Por favor, escuchen nuestra voz hispana.
We want to save our teachers. Please hear our Hispanic voice.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Elizabeth Ortiz. Ms. Ortiz, you have 1 minute.
My name is Julio Ortiz, and I'm a 6th grader in HISD. Thanks to my teachers, librarians, dual language, and magnet programs, I'm able to communicate and read in 3 different languages: Espanol, El Arabiya, and English. This week, I read Good Reason Houston's report on HISD. What I found the most interesting was the chart showing us kids as market share for charters. This is basically equating us to candy bars sold at the gas station. By the way, I do not like being called market share. What I also don't like is being equivalent to a STAR test results. About STAR, I really don't like how you made our teachers scripted and pushed us onto computers instead of face-to-face. Every child deserves to learn from kind, caring teachers, librarians, and nurses, and for you to trust them.
Thank you. Thank you for coming to speak with us tonight. Mr. Hester, followed by Sean Rushing and then Sarah Terrell. Mr. Hester, you have 1 minute.
I'm here to address Mr. Floyd, Mike Miles, the man that cowardly didn't show up today until after everybody's done speaking. Mike Miles, your real name is Floyd, a black man's name that you don't carry and you're ashamed of carrying, so you use Mike. When studying history, Floyd, don't you know that slave masters use half-breeds to carry out their plans? Not saying that mixed blacks aren't black, because some of our strongest leaders were mixed. But there were others like you who were appointed by his master to destroy and divide the slaves, which in this case, the poor and underprivileged kids of my community of Cashmere Gardens and Fifth Ward. You will not fool us with your military awards and diplomacy, because the military has never served my people. It has only served the white man's agenda of colonization of the world. Now I'm asking you, Floyd, please step down, because Fifth Ward won't. And as well as all you people sitting up at these front desks, they just put you here as a distraction as well. You guys serve no purpose sitting up there. Y'all just sitting here so y'all can separate yourself from the people.
Ms. Rushing, followed by Sarah Terrell, and then Kendra Yarbrough Camarena. Ms. Rushing?
Good evening.
Thank you.
My name is Sean Rushing, and I want to let you all know I know what the hospital model is. I worked at MD Anderson for 28 years, and one thing that you're missing when you choose to change things is you're missing service excellence. You're missing the facts that you need to engage all stakeholders. The stakeholders are not just the children, they're not just the adults, they're not just you all, they're not just the superintendent, they're all of us. Also, I would like to just share with you some of my concerns, because as one who has demanded that my children receive a free, appropriate public education, and one who tried charter schools, I ask that you realign your thoughts. Respect and empower the fact that we choose HISD. For many years, many of us have worked to ensure the children of our communities have access to more than our children had. However, we have had plans and individuals who visit for short terms and then leave us to move on to other projects or experiments. As you implement your plan for pay increases for teachers, which I support, please allow your leadership and that of board of managers to include stakeholder feedback in which you listen and understand. Remember, when you are gone, we will still be here because we live here and we strive for our children to be educated in HISD.
Thank you, ma'am.
Our children are resilient and will adapt. Yet again, let's move forward together, because we are Team HISD and nothing less. The noise is our voice, loud yet proud, and
Ms.
present
Rushing.
to represent every student who chooses HISD.
Ms. Rushing, thank you. Our next speaker is Sarah Terrell, followed by Kendra Yarbrough Camarena, and then Vera Moore. Yes, ma'am.
Run it like a business. But when that business product is children, you don't say that part out loud. But it's simple. We're going to slash magnet programs to save money for the vaunted teacher pay raises. We're going to use 1099 contractors instead of real teachers. So let me tell you what I saw on the internet of what dyad looks like. On the video on YouTube, and I'd send you the link, but you don't have emails, you can see some pretty interesting stuff. You can see a kid, a bunch of kids on stationary bikes. I believe Mike talked about that last week. You can see some kids in a hot parking lot doing something with traffic cones and a basketball. you can see a bunch of what appear to be fifth grade boys sitting on a cafeteria floor playing patty cake. Yes, patty cake. I assume that's phys ed. There was one more scene of a classroom with one boy running and everybody watching.
Thank you,
So,
ma'am.
Destination 2035, like Destination 2016 and 2020 before it, is a pump and dump, and we're going to get dumped. And you're going to be dumped with it.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Vera Moore, followed by Karina Quesada, and then Allison Newport. Oh.
Gracias.
Sure.
All right. So my name is Kendra Yarbrough Gambarena. My overall concern for tonight is that the board is considering suspending policy that was created based on the vision of the district. I know in the past, visions change, and in the past, when the vision changed, the policy is amended, not suspended. And that's a big difference. And so one of my concerns with this is that when you don't have any policy whatsoever to provide any type of guidance, then there becomes a problem with any type of, it's almost like unlimited government, what I used to teach. Okay? It's unchecked decision making that occurs. This may be your goal. I don't know. It may be that you have not seen the big picture of the potential unintended consequences of you suspending this board policy, even if it's temporary. But you need to really think large, because when you suspend this board policy, whichever ones you decide to suspend tonight, there will be unintended consequences, and you will be the face of that.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Karina Quesada, followed by Allison Newport, and then Maria Benzon. Ms. Quesada?
Vera Moore, before.
Oh, I'm sorry, Vera Moore?
Okay.
Ms. Moore, please go ahead.
Okay. Hi, my name is Vera, and I am in high school at ISD. It is wrong for you to make every teacher in 28 schools, including Sugar Grove, which is in my area, reapply for their jobs. This undermines the sustainability of teachers bringing to our learning, where we spend 8 hours a day. Teachers are really important in my life. My 9th grade geography teacher helped me learn so much this year. I don't know how he did it, but he helped all my friends because we are now more focused this year, and we knew he cared more than just about our grades. It is hard to be a kid living in apartments without many resources, trying to do the best I can to recover from the COVID isolation. Teachers are the backbone of our education system. They inspire us, challenge us, and guide us towards the realizing of our full potential. We, the students, should have the say in the education we receive and the teachers who shape our future.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Karina Quesada, followed by Allison Newport. Ms. Quesada, you have 1 minute.
Hi, I've provided for you a report titled The Challenge of Disruptive Leadership in Dallas ISD, an examination of the Miles administration's goals and leadership practices. This report was commissioned by the Foundation for Community Empowerment back in 2013. I doubt you had a chance to read it before tonight, but I urge you to read it. Many of the changes he's imposing on these 28 schools are old, tried, and failed reforms. You don't have to wait and see how they'll play out. You've got a report right there detailing it. Do not change or suspend any of these board policies. Do not give Miles a blank check. And if you're not going to make magnet changes at all magnet schools, then definitely vote no on this. Children in these 28 schools deserve more than test prep. They deserve to read books and go on adventures. Don't condemn them to boring star passages. They deserve librarians and certified teachers for electives and specialties. All kids do, not just those in affluent areas. If this board wants to make big changes, try small class sizes with certified teachers for all classes at these schools. Relationships matters. Making teachers reapply for their jobs sends out the message that you don't care about them. And let's be clear that this stunt would never be done in an affluent school. You certainly wouldn't be trying any magnet changes there, because for years, anytime a superintendent wanted to bring some changes or equity, those people have showed up and stopped any changes for equity.
Your minute is up. Thank you. Ms. Newport, followed by Ms. Benzon, and then Ms. Sage Bittner.
Good evening.
Ms. Newport, go ahead.
My name's Allison Newport, and I'm the parent of 2 HISD elementary schoolers. Please consider delaying voting on magnet changes until you have more information about this NES program. It sounds too good to be true, and we don't have enough details. How does this work financially? How do we pay teachers better and pay them $100,000 a year, but it's still budget neutral? That doesn't make sense. The math does not add up. In other schools, Miles used a teacher and a teaching assistant assigned to multiple classrooms teaching virtually. Is that the plan for our schools? Please, I implore you to find out before you make these changes.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Maria Benzon, followed by Ms. Sage Bentner. Ms. Benzon, you have a minute.
My name is Maria Benzon. I'm addressing item 21, suspending regulations regarding applications and interviews. I teach at Sugar Grove Academy and work with an amazing educator like Mr. Chin, who all these teachers teach math to newcomers and students with disabilities. On June 1st, the last day of school, Mr. Chin flew to China. When he landed on June 3rd, he found out he had to reapply for his job since SGA was an NES school. Mr. Chin turned his 10 weeks off to 10 days. The NES website states, if you have an immovable conflict, contact the hiring manager. He did, and was told that there were no other offerings outside of the dates, June 28th to 29th. His wedding day is June 30th in China. That's 8 days from now, but he has to be here in person. He set his wedding date 3 years ago and on the other side of the world, but he has to be here in person. Apparently, in Mr. Miles' administration, employees should prioritize their job over their families. Our students deserve the best teachers. HISD should do better to retain highly qualified teachers like Mr. Chin. Please work with him so he can interview and still have time to make it to his own wedding in person.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Adita Sage Bittner. Ms. Sage Bittner.
Hi, my name is Adita Sage Bittner, and I'm a fourth grader at Condit Elementary. I love my teachers, and I love to go to the library where the librarian reads interesting books to us. I like learning about math and science, too. When I'm older, I want to volunteer at a doggy daycare. I'm here because of items 22 and 23, plans to evaluate teachers and principals. I understand that you are super focused on test scores, but please listen. I am more than a test score. My friends and I are more than our test scores. Our teachers and principals are more than our school's test scores. My friends and I like learning cool facts, collaborating on projects, and sharing what we researched on Google Slides or posters. If your main focus is the STAR and evaluating teachers and principals with this, then I'm afraid that teaching will be focused on passing the STAR and not inspiring us to learn for the sake of learning. On behalf of my friends and classmates, please value our teachers and principals for educating us as human beings and future leaders, not as test scores. Thank you.
Thank you. Did one of our Zoom speakers
our last
join us?
Yes. Sister Mama Sonia, you may turn on your camera and begin.
All right, here I am. Disrespect us, misuse us, never listen to us. Y'all don't really care about us.
Ma'am, I don't think your video is on. Can you please turn on your video?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, ma'am.
I keep hitting it. Now, let me start over. Disrespect us, misuse us, never listen to us. Y'all don't really care about us. I come here to again say that this takeover and your alleged service is a sham. You are illegal. You are the epitome of taxation without representation. You are puppets. We have no way to contact you via email, no phone, unless the HISD website has recently been updated. Do any of you all even live in our black and brown communities? Miles, where are you? I wish I made over $1,200 a day and not have to show up for work. This takeover, and you are a travesty, and all you ought to be ashamed of yourselves for denigrating our scholars, teachers, administrators, schools, and support personnel. And last week, having an awesome young man arrested for just trying to come to a meeting, restricting access to a board meeting. Shame, shame, shame on you fascist demagogues. Disrespect you, violate us, ignore us, refuse to listen to us. Y'all don't really care about us. Bye.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you to everyone who spoke tonight. Sir, in the white suit, this is a warning to you. Please do not interrupt or disrupt this meeting, or we'll have to ask you to leave. Thank you to everyone who spoke tonight, especially our students, for being here tonight with us. Our next item on the agenda is that Mr. Superintendent Miles has a presentation regarding Destination 2035, which he spoke about at our last meeting, but which he will, I think we're going to have a video, is that right? Mr. Miles? Mr. Miles, you have the floor.
Madam President, members of the board, thank you for giving me some time to talk about Destination 2035. The board has had some information about it, but I want to give a lot more detail tonight and go through this PowerPoint and then take your questions. I think I'll stop every once in a while so that we don't have all the questions at the end. And give you an opportunity to respond to various parts of this. So the first thing to say is that there are a lot of good things happening in HISD. There are several good schools. We have schools that are getting some We have some schools that are doing well. There are magnet schools that are doing well. But not all kids are in schools that are doing well. Let's look at just a little bit of the promise that we have in the education profession. When I grew up, education was the great equalizer. The more education you got, if you worked hard at school, even if you were in the zip code of high poverty, educators could change your stars. Schools could change your stars. As you know, I grew up one of 8 kids, poor. My father's black, my mother's Japanese. She didn't speak English. My dad was often in Korea and Vietnam. And we didn't have a lot, but we did have an education. And I got lucky because educators helped me. And I've always been grateful to them. But the promise of education being the great equalizer has largely been broken. That promise isn't true for all kids. That promise has been broken. In HISD, yes, we have some good schools. We have schools that are doing well, and we have kids who are performing well. But the vast majority are not. Let's look at the data, and then we'll talk about things that are not data. So, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, that's the nation's report card. It's the most consistent test or assessment that American kids take because it's across the country and it's been given year after year. This is the latest one. The nation, let's just take 4th grade reading, for example. The nation's proficiency level, or kids who are meeting standard, reading at grade level, is 32%. 32% of our kids can read at grade level in the country in 4th grade. That is low. I hope as a country we're not satisfied with 1/3 of our kids reading at grade level. Texas is close. So the Texas schools have 30%. That's close to the nation. So that's at least where the nation is. Large urbans, so other big cities, because people recognize that cities have challenges that maybe some other places don't. Large urbans is 26%, and Houston, HISD, our district, is at 19%. We can look at all the other scores, and it's similarly low. Lower than Texas, lower than the nation. So problem number one is that our achievement is low. And we don't have to just take a look at NAEP. I'm going to get to STAR in a second and then other exams in a minute. But problem number 2 is that our proficiency has not risen over 19 years. Take a look at, for example, at HISD's 4th grade proficiency from 2003 to 2022. By the way, all of this is publicly available information. People can look up the data themselves online. We've grown 1 percentage point in 19 years. 1. That is not a story that we want to brag about. 8th grade reading, 4 percentage points in 19 years. Yes, we grew 4 points, but over 19 years, I hope nobody's celebrating that. So problem number 1, low proficiency rates. Problem number 2, continually low proficiency rate, which is a systems problem. But problem number 3 is probably worse than 1 or 2, and that is the achievement gap. Take a look at the right-hand side of the screen. Yes, our white students are doing fairly well at 60% reading. That's good. That's comparable to the rest of the nation and to the Texas schools. But black students are reading at 11% proficiency. Hispanic students at 14% proficiency. The gap is too large. It's 49% for African Americans. It's 46% for Hispanic students. In HISD, these are kids in HISD that are compared to each other. This is publicly available too. And I hope, well, we can look at more data. This is math. The gap is even worse. Problem number 1, low proficiency. Problem number 2, unable to improve the proficiency over time. Problem number 3, which I think is an equity issue, is the gap is too big. So some people ask about the NES schools, for example. These are the STAR scores. Maybe we don't want to talk a lot about STAR, so let's just talk a little bit about it. NES schools on average for the 4th grade reading is lower than HISD, which I already told you was low. 4th grade math, 33 compared to 41 for HISD. Middle school, it's worse. 22% of the math students, 8th grade math students in the NES schools are proficient or above. And then it gets worse in high school. 15% of our high school kids in Kashmir, North Forest, and Wheatley are doing algebra at the proficient level or higher. 15. So if you look at these 3 slides real quickly, one thing you notice is that the proficiency gets worse as they get older, which means that this is a feeder pattern problem. You can't just address one school, a high school, with 15% math and think you're going to solve that problem without addressing the education of the middle schoolers who are feeding into the high school. But let's forget all the data. Forget the STAR scores. Forget NAEP. And I want to ask you and the community and everybody on staff, can the kids read? So forget the scores. Let's ask the question, can the kids read? And the kids on average are not reading well. So look at the STAR scores, right? The accountability. There are accountability scores of schools in NES that have a B. And then the kids are reading at a 20% proficiency rate, 7th grade. 20%. So it's important to look at the accountability scores. It's important to look at the other scores. Most important is, can they read, do math, and do they have the competencies to be prepared for year 2035? That's the question. And the answer is, we're not reading well. Now, some people want to say that the kids are doing well. Some kids are, no question. We are a tale of two districts. One where kids are doing fine, where the magnet schools, many magnet schools are doing fine, and where this group is not doing fine. And yes, it's an equity issue, but first we got to face the brutal facts. If we think we're doing well academically, then everything you're going to try to do and I'm going to try to do will be seen as for naught. But the facts are the facts. Our kids deserve better than what they're getting. But there's a fourth problem. A fourth problem that hopefully the board, because of your vision, is also going to address. Even if our kids could read at the proficient level, even if all of them could, we still have a problem. And that is the world has moved on. And there are year 2035 competencies that our kids need, like information literacy, problem solving, learning how to learn, working in teams, working with AI, communications. Those are really key things, not just for high schoolers, but also for the kids who are going through this system in 12 years, so that they reach year 2035 ready. Problem number one, low proficiency. Problem number two, inability to move that proficiency rate over 20 years. Problem number three, achievement gap that's way too high and is an equity issue. Problem number four, we're not spending enough time on year 2035 competencies. Our kids won't be ready. So then the question is can it be done? It's not like people haven't been working hard. It's not like there haven't been other superintendents or programs. It's not like there haven't been other school boards working hard to try to solve this problem. The answer is, it is possible, but we have to work differently. I tell you right now, I say in public, I've said this to the staff, to the principals, and the teachers, HISD cannot improve this system, has no chance, zero chance of improving or changing those data or getting kids to read or preparing kids for the year 2035 if we keep doing the same thing. You're going to get a lot of comments over the next year, 2 years, 3 years that we want to protect the same thing here. We're going to protect the same thing there, and that is a recipe for failure. That is why the scores haven't changed. That is why you have separate interest groups wanting to hold on tight to what they've always done. So what to do? Before I tell you what I think the direction we should go, I have to talk about one other thing, and that is the system. I know this is complicated for some. Let me try to break it down, what it means. Every system is designed to get the results it's getting. Every organization is designed to get its outcomes. If they want different outcomes, they have to change the system. Right now, HISD has the system that is getting the results it's getting. I'll wait.
Are you asking for questions?
What's that?
Are you asking for questions?
No, not yet. Just in 1 minute, though, ma'am. I'm waiting for the disruption.
Sir, in the blue jacket, you're disrupting our meeting. If you continue to disrupt, we'll have to ask you to leave.
All right. So every system is designed to get the results it's getting. We need a different system. We can't get different results if we don't change things. We can't. There's no way to do that. So we'll get different results if we change the system. It's like trying to change a system by only changing one piece. The biggest problem with urban districts over the last 20 years is that we do incremental piecemeal reform. piece by piece, Band-Aid by Band-Aid. And one of the reasons is because boards and superintendents draw back as soon as there's criticism of one thing they're going to change. So they don't change much. They change one piece that won't insult or embarrass or make angry any part of the community. We, education profession, we leaders in education profession have done this over and over again over the last 20 years. And it hasn't worked. And people are going to try to convince you to do this, and we'll be here again 20 years from now with the same scores. It would be like trying to take a watch and making an Apple Watch by changing one gear. It's like taking Blockbusters and trying to make it a Netflix. There's no way you can change pieces of Blockbusters to make it a Netflix. So here's the vision. Here's the vision for people who want to hear the direction of the district and what we will try to do as a board, as an administrative team. We have to do whole-scale systemic reform. Not piecemeal reform, but whole-scale systemic reform. We're going to try to do 150 schools, whole-scale reform, and I'm going to explain what that means in a minute. Not 273, because there are some schools that don't need transformation. There are particular conditions, there are particular areas, context, doesn't require them to change whole scale. But there are enough schools that are struggling, that need additional resources, that needs a different system, a transformative system, that we have to do whole scale reform. 150 of them over the next several years. Let me stop there and take questions related to either the data, the system, and then I'll get into other goals and actions.
On the data, sir, can you tell us, and you're probably going to get into this in a moment, but tell us on the data that you've looked at, how that relates to or informs what the plan is that you're going to set out for us.
Yeah, so the whole focus, and you'll see in the goals, is to help kids read better, do math, and prepare for the year 2035. So the plan has to be informed by data, whether it's reading data, math data, or other data related to the competencies. So foundationally, one of the foundational skills, even for innovation, is being able to read. Even in the year 2035, you have to be able to read if you want the higher skilled jobs, if you want to be competitive in this environment and world. So reading is foundational. We will do other things, yes, but reading is foundational, so the data around that is really important. And so that's why I bring up the data. We have looked at, and we could give you many more slides on individual schools around the data. And again, not all schools are failing, not all schools are doing poorly, but many schools are. And so the plan is around bringing those schools up, keeping our strong schools strong, helping them with a little bit of improvement, but there's no need to take anything away, and we're not going to do that. And we're going to add to these schools too. Other questions?
Mr. Ravon?
You've alluded to the fact that accountability scores don't equate to academic success, and I was wondering if you could expand on that thought.
So it's not that accountability scores don't matter or don't relate. They do correlate. So accountability, but we have to be clear about what the actual data means. For example, we in education, we in Texas in particular, should have been a lot more honest about what the accountability score meant last year. When the scores came out a year ago, what it really meant, and we should praise what we can praise, but let's also be honest about where we are. The year before last year, the scores fell incredibly low. Because there was a pandemic, because it was COVID, the scores dropped incredibly. So there was reason for that. Last year, the scores went back up, but they went back up to normal, which was already low, in reading and didn't catch up in math. We, all the districts in Texas, got extra credit, more points, because of the growth. So when you drop down low and you come back to where you were, it's going to look like huge growth. It is growth, but it's growth that's from the bottom that we reached. And so now when we get the new STAR scores, there's going to be scores that are much lower, because we no longer get credit for the growth from way below. So we haven't been honest. So the accountability score, if you have a B, it's because you grew a lot, or the CCMR is another story, but let me just focus on the growth. If you got a B, it doesn't mean that your kids can read at grade level. 20% is not reading at grade level. It is for 20%, but 80% are not. So that's why I mean we shouldn't discount accountability, okay? That's not what I'm saying. But we should understand what the accountability rating is. And those of us who do data for a living can explain that rather than looking at a B and saying everybody's okay. So I hope that answers your question, sir.
By hand raise, anybody? Any other questions?
Yeah, go ahead. Any other questions?
Jeanette?
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right, thank you, ma'am. All right, so what we're trying to do is a few things. Because the how is also important, right? It's not just the vision, it's how you get there, and you have to set some goals. A plan without goals or metrics is just a piece of paper. So we have goals and we have metrics for almost everything, as you've seen in the action plan, the 225-page document. But basically, this is it that we're hoping to have a good discussion with the board at some point. Decrease the number of DNF schools from blank in 2023 to fewer than 10 by July 2024. Now, I don't know exactly what that blank is. I have some initial data from the what if data from the state that says that number is going to be much higher than it is today. So that's going to be a seriously hard goal to achieve, but that's the goal. By the way, it's also one of the goals, one of the criteria for getting out of the intervention is not to have any schools with multiple years of DNF. So we want to get out of the intervention as fast as we can. That's got to be part of the goals. But at the same time, we're going to raise the overall accountability rating for the NES schools. We're going to achieve a 1.7 years of growth on NWA math and move the percentile growth 7%. That is a tough, tough goal to achieve. What that says is we're going to try to grow the kids almost 2 years, 1.7 years of growth. Most people only expect schools to do 1 year of growth in 1 year's time. Our gap is too high. If we have 1 year's growth in 1 year's time, that gap is going to be the same or just a little bit improved 10 years from now. So we have to do better than that. 7% percentile. If the gap is 30%, in 4 years we close the gap. If we get 7% percentile growth, that means moving the proficiency 7% a year. Most schools and districts wouldn't put anything up like that because the gap hasn't closed and they'd be afraid that they're not going to meet that metric. So we're setting challenging goals, real goals, that the board will hold me and the staff accountable for. Improve the quality of instruction. Yes, the quality of instruction is a leading indicator. Most strong principals and administrators can go into any classroom, or a school, stay for an hour, look at the quality of instruction, and tell you where your achievement score is going to be. Quality of instruction is a leading indicator, and we're going to focus on that. There hasn't been a focus on quality of instruction. We're going to do it, and you can see those goals right there. Third thing, special education has been a challenge for this district, but all districts. Yes, there are compliance things, and by the way, the district has improved on identifying kids faster. So that's a bright point, and that's a good thing to celebrate. We're not done with that, but that's a good thing. What we as a profession, and HISD also, has not done, we have not recognized and done something about the SPED load on our SPED teacher, the amount that we require special education teachers to do. Not only are we insisting on great instruction, but we have all this paperwork and compliance. So we have to address that clearly. And you know that in the plan we've talked about before, we're going to do that. At the same time, we're going to make sure that our special needs students with special needs, get great quality instruction. Some of our special needs students aren't getting good reading instruction. Sometimes a kid, and I say this as a person who's been in the field for 35 years, or 28 years rather, I say this as that because I've seen it where sometimes students are identified as a special needs student, but they never had good reading instruction. So they can't read, and then they get identified as special education a couple years later, 3 years later. So we have to do a better job than that, and that's why that's one of the goals. Finally, CCMR. I talked about year 2035. People are right to say that some of our schools are not getting the same amount of resources, the same programming as other schools. That's true. And one of the big areas is college, entering public service, and graduating with an industry-approved certification. We need to grow that. We also need to upgrade our CTE programs, especially at the NES high schools. Why should some schools have much better CTE programs and magnet programs and other schools are not? That doesn't seem right to me. That seems like an equity problem. Does it take more resources? Yes. That takes more resources. Now, what we're not going to do, we have schools that are doing well. And while these schools have magnet programs and CTE programs that are at this level and resourced well, we're going to try to maintain that for the schools that are doing well, trying not to take away. However, in order to provide greater resources here, we have to find money in the budget by cutting, being more efficient. And when we get new monies, it's not going to be spread equally. It's going to be prioritized to the schools that are the most needy with regard to our services. So services provided for our most needy schools is one of the things we got to do, and we got to prioritize the need. How do we get there? How do we get there? Here's what it really takes, guys. I got to spend a beat on this because it's not just about the programs. It's not just about the money. It's not just about how we prioritize. It's not just about the programs. It's about the courage. One of the things that I've been so proud of the board on is the courage you've already shown. I'm asking you that over the next year or two, you show the same level of courage day after day after day, because that's what it's going to take. I've been there, been through the fire. We're going to get, I will get criticized. I'm okay with that. I get paid for that. I apologize to you right now. I apologize to you right now because you're going to receive some of that as well. And board, you will receive some things as well as you already have. But let's not make light of the fact that this job is going to require all of our team, all of you, and actually members of the community to have courage to do things differently, to hear things that are not true, and still
Ma'am
stay
in the red
course.
shirt here in the center, if you'll please keep your comments to yourself and not interrupt what Mr. Miles is trying to say today. If I'm forced to give you another warning, then I'll ask you to leave. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think you know what I mean, and it's going to be a years-long process, guys. The reason why schools have not done, or districts have not done what we're going to do, is because of this. Not because they don't have the right plan. The second thing is a sense of urgency. We could have waited. There's no question, right? We could have waited, done 60-day or 90-day listening tour. Then we could have gotten 5 or 6 committees together to help put a strategic plan together, and I could bring you a strategic plan in April, right? And that strategic plan would have piecemeal things that don't make nobody angry. We could have done that. And had we done that, our kids would be a year further behind. A year further behind. Because the adults have all the time in the world. I have time. Even Jim Terry has time. But our kids don't have any time. So we have to work with a sense of urgency for kids. To put kids first over adult issues, because adults have time and the kids don't. So, whole-scale systemic reform, how do we do it? You can't do the whole district at one time. You can't do whole-scale reform at one time. It's like building a plane while you're flying it. So the way we do it is what's called split screen. You take a subset of the district, you whole-scale reform it, and then it will, over time, you grow that subset. That's how we do it. And that's why 240 schools this coming year, won't have a lot of changes. 240 schools will have some changes, of course, like special ed we're going to do across the board. We're going to improve special education services across the board regardless of the school. We're going to have a principal eval across the board regardless of the school. But other than that, most of the 240 schools will see very few changes that are substantive. The other schools, however, will be part of the new education system, and they will see whole-scale systemic reform, but mostly in a very supportive way. In fact, I'll tell the board right now, we'll have more data for you. At the principals training last week, many principals came up, and we had a meeting today. This room was filled with principals who are considering, who want to do new education system. They came up to me last week, dozens of them, said they want to do NES, and I wasn't planning on it, but we're considering allowing them to do the NES system on a totally voluntary nature. So we gave some information today that shows you, despite the criticism comments, that the principals understand this is a supportive thing. This is an equity thing. This is more resources to these schools. They get that, and so they want part of it. And so I need to bring the board more information. It's just preliminary, but it's in response to principals who want to do this, not just these 28 schools. All right. So I'm going on a little bit long, so I'm going to rush through the rest of these slides. Before I go any further on the how, does anybody have any other questions before I go further?
I do have one question, Superintendent. Good afternoon. When I saw this, so I know that in HISD historically we've had programs that kind of resembled some of this. Achieve 180, Rise most recently, and I think from what the community has shared historically, that hasn't been as successful. So from a sustainability perspective with this program, how do we make sure that long-term wise, well, short-term in the next 5 or 6 years while you're here, and then long-term wise, it's still successful?
I'm trying hard not to give you a movie quote from Gregory Hines' Tap. I don't do it like everybody else, remember? So the reason why those reforms have failed or have not been as successful or as impactful, because you're absolutely right. I mean, every superintendent has outlined this program, that program, right? Everybody who comes in does that. So why is this going to work? Because it's whole-scale systemic reform. What does that mean? It means you take a school and you fundamentally change all the big pieces around it because it's a system. So we change the instructional model. We improve the curriculum. We change how teachers are coached. We change the evaluation system. We change the staffing model. We change how people are paid. We change how we treat teachers as professional, where their copies are made for them, lesson plans are given. We do all of that at one time because it's whole scale. If you just do one piece of it, it's like curriculum, right? Let's say you say we need a new curriculum, but you don't have a program, or not a program, a system to implement it, to ensure that it's implemented correctly. Then it doesn't work. And you have curriculum or textbooks in boxes in the closet, even though you said you're going to implement a new curriculum. So it's whole-scale systemic reform. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I understand the urgency, and seeing the scores you showed earlier, that completely makes sense to me. One thing I do wonder, as you comment on how we won't impact schools that are high performing, is I'd be interested in metrics and understanding what good looks like in HISD. What can you comment on related to that, given our diverse district?
Yeah, that's a great question. It involves a number of things, but let me just give you the big bullets on what good looks like. Number one, good looks like great quality instruction. We have spent 4 days with principals. We're going to spend more time with principals. We're going to spend more time with teachers on what exactly that means, so that everybody here, or all my leadership team, can walk into any school and at least have the same common language about this is what great quality instruction looks like. It's research-based. It's well known what good quality instruction, but we need to be consistent, and everybody needs to know, including the superintendent, on down to the assistant principal. So that's number one. Number two is you have to have good, strong curricula, right? So things like a science of reading curriculum, those are the things that you need to help all kids. Number three, you have to be able to have high-quality instruction delivered by effective teachers who can get outcomes for kids. And then I can go on, but there's a couple other things. You have to have special education programs so that we're serving our neediest kids instructionally, not just through compliance. We have to have strong CTE programs, career tech ed, so that kids are prepared for college, career, the military, public service, or an industry-approved certification. So our strong schools, when we say effective schools, it's not just the ones that are getting A's and B's. It's the ones that are doing these things for kids. And that's what we'll try to preserve. And right now we have a lot of schools that are doing that. The reason why it's 150 and not 273 is because we have schools that don't need transformation, because they're doing what the things that I just talked about. Thanks for asking the question. Okay. All right, I'm going to race through these. Number one, got to have great quality principals, strong teachers. So effective principals will have effective principals who understand high quality instruction, and they know that their job is going to be improving the quality of instruction for our students. Division superintendents are going to have good unit leaders who then have good principals who are raising the quality of instruction in the classroom every day. There has not been that focus. There will be. Principals have said they're ready to do this. They want compliance and some reports taken off their plate. So we're in the process of looking at every single compliance report that a principal has to do, and we're going to take it off. We can't take everything off their plate, but we can take a whole bunch of it off so that they can focus on instruction and leadership like they want to do. The same thing goes for teachers. Got to have high quality instruction, have to get good feedback. I've never seen a coach on a football field who would show up to practice every 3 or 4 weeks. They're on the field, they're shoulder to shoulder, they're coaching side by side, they're in the classroom doing job-embedded professional development. That's what we're going to have as the second priority work area. Priority work area 3. Central office. You all saw at the last budget meeting at the last week that the central office expenditures have risen 61%, while at the same time we lost 27,000 students. That wasn't my slide, that was the last administration slide that they presented to the board in May. But, it's confirmed by us that that's the case. Central office has ballooned and number of students has declined. We want higher salaries. We want to prioritize our resources. We need to cut down the size of central office and make it more efficient. That doesn't mean that people aren't doing a job in central office. All of the people that are in the central office are doing a job. The question is, can we prioritize and make things more efficient and effective so that we push the resources to the classroom, push the resources to the schools? That'll be much more effective, cost less money, and then we can put the money into salaries, into special programs for our most underserved kids. Reading. Yes. Reading wars are over. In the end of the day, in order for a kid to read well, they have to be able to decode, that's what the D stands for, and they need language comprehension, which is knowledge, content knowledge, to support that reading. If they don't have content knowledge, it's going to be very tough. So that's one of the things we're going to focus on. Pre-K. Just today, I had a conversation with Marisol from early childhood. I told her one of the things we want to do was start with the NES schools, and then we'll also try to tackle the 8 early childhood centers. I want only 15 kids in a classroom. 15. Not 22, not 30 like they have right now. Some of the classrooms have 30, some have 22. I said a good reading program for pre-K, or good program for pre-K, has 12 to 15. So she's going to look at that. I asked her to tell me how much that costs. We're going to do it for the NES schools to start. Then we're going to look at the 8 early childhood centers. We're going to have to spend some money to make sure that the pre-K teacher only has 15 kids, not 22, not 30. I've been in the pre-K classrooms with 25 kids. That's almost an impossible job. So we're going to have 15. I told her also that if, because of the size of the school, let's say they only have 6 classrooms, but they have 70 kids, 15 times 6 is, already too many kids in the classroom. If we have to add kids to the classroom, if it's 20 or more, then we have a pre-K teacher and an assistant. You follow me? So we're going to shoot for 15. Can't always do it based on the number of classrooms. You follow me? Then we're going to add a teacher's assistant. So we're serious about this, willing to spend money on this. We're going to start, can't do the whole district, guys, but we're going to start with the NES schools. So you can see, I hope you can see already that NES isn't about taking away. NES is about giving more. And then we're going to do as many other schools as we can. So 8 early childhood centers are all over the district. They're not located in NES. We're going to do the same thing at those centers. And then eventually, if other schools have trouble staffing their pre-K and they have more than 15 in a classroom, we're going to try to cut those back down to 15. Can't do that overnight, but we're going to start that way. So everything we're talking about is more support. It costs money, but we have enough money to do the supports for 28 schools, even if we don't have it for the whole district. All right, number 5, special ed. We've talked about special ed. There's a lot that we have to do. It's not just compliance. SPED teachers are focused on compliance because that was the law and they had too much to do. We're going to put teachers' assistants, we're starting with NES again, more support for NES, not taking from NES. More support, special education in particular. Those teachers will get a teaching assistant who can do some of the compliance things, can put together the paperwork for ARDS, can look at IEP progress monitoring, that sort of thing. That's going to happen in our NES schools. And eventually, I don't want it to seem like only NES is going to do stuff. We're going to do SPED across the district this year. We can't do everything that the NES schools are going to get across the district, but eventually that's where we're headed, okay? Because special education is a national challenge, not just an HISD challenge. And I really respect SPED teachers who teach students with special needs. It's a really hard job. And I'm talking about life skill kids, the teachers also. It's a really hard job, and we need to do something about that to help them teach our kids better. We're pushing the supports to the schools. Like I said, and that's a SPED support for every unit. There's 12 units. SPED support to the schools. And yes, we're paying them more. We're also going to do sunrise centers. And people talk about SEL. So one of the things that Houston HISD has done well is wraparound services. There's a program called Purple, Unitas does it, and they do this platform, and every school engages in that, and that's a pretty good wraparound system. It doesn't provide all the answers, of course, but it's a pretty good start. Every school has a wraparound specialist, or I forget the exact title, I think it's wraparound specialist, but that has also been very good for our kids in HISD. So that's not going away. What we're going to do is we're going to add SEL. One of the things we're trying to do is we're going to locate 6 sunrise centers. We're going to try to co-locate them with the community. And that means there's community that part of the community already provides either food service, clothes service. And for our neediest students, we're going to co-locate with them, with the community centers. We're going to invest $2 million in each of these centers, not counting the staff, so that we help them to help us. And that should be good for the community. This is an additive thing for our neediest kids. So the kids who are struggling the most with health or emotional services, they will have their schools, yes, still. And on top of that, we're going to try to benefit the community through Sunrise Center. And our most needy students, or students who are most traumatized, can also have an additional center to go to, as well as their school. This is not a new problem in HISD. Our facilities have some challenges, partly because we haven't passed a bond in a while. And so we need to continue to improve the safety. We actually need to improve a bond, but what I've asked Wanda Paul to do is to do another security audit. And by the way, the last administration didn't ignore this either. They also did a security audit. They also did TEA's required audit. We're going to update that. We're going to triage that. And so one part of these things that we need we'll pay for this year. The most needy facilities with regard to security, we're going to dip into the fund balance and try to do that this year. And then hopefully the board, you will discuss whether or not we go out for a bond at some point. New education system, I won't spend a lot on this except to say, teachers, there are schools and districts where we have not treated teachers like true professionals. What I mean by that is we have given them so much to do, so many extra things to do, that they can't focus on the main job, which is the quality of instruction in the classroom. And we need to treat them, it's called the hospital model for a reason, because we need to treat them like they're doctors. Only things we can't pay them like they're doctors, but we can raise their salaries, right? And what we need to do is make sure that administration, deans, counselors handle the discipline, so teachers can teach undisrupted. We need to provide their lesson plans for them. They can tweak it if they want, but we need to give it to them. We need to give them the PowerPoint, the demonstration of learning, the assignments, the answer keys. We need to make copies for them. This is what we're going to do in the new education system schools, by the way. We're going to make copies for them. Papers, not the demonstration of learning is graded every day by the teacher, but outside of class, any grading that has to be done is done by support personnel. We're going to do 4 periods of duty in a month, so limited duty. That way a teacher in our system will have better work-life balance, right? That's what teachers want. They want to be able to go home at 4:15 and be done. They want to be able at the weekend be done. Now, a lot of teachers are going to do extra work anyway, and that's okay. They're going to stay after school and do after-school tutoring. That's okay, but that's their choice. They're going to get paid a good salary here in the new education system school, which is the way it should be, right? $86,000 average dollar salary, $86,000 average salary for the NES middle school, plus a $10,000 stipend. That shouldn't be like, oh, wow, that's great. That should be, okay, that's normal. That's the way it should be. And we're going to try to get there eventually in HISD across the board. We don't have enough money to do everything. We got to start somewhere. Teachers want that. Teachers don't want a career ladder where it takes 15 years. You start at $60,000. The last board raised starting salaries to $60,000. That's a good thing. That's a good thing for any district. But then it takes 15 years to get to $72,000. That's too long a wait to raise your salary, that only $12,000. Whereas when your peers out there who also have degrees are getting a lot quicker advancement. So good starting salary, let's do better than that. We think the number of teachers leaving mid-year is going to continue to trend up. So we're going to do a new staffing model where the goal is to treat teachers like professionals, doctors, and also make sure that a kid has 185 student-teacher contact days of high-quality instruction. This year it'll be 173 student-teacher contact days of high-quality instruction. I'm almost done, guys. Then I'll take questions. We need to implement a new evaluation system. Despite anything you've heard, I just give you the research. If people are willing to look at research and facts rather than anything on social media, you'll see that the evaluation system has been one of the best things for the Dallas Independent School District. And so we're going to implement the new principal evaluation system this year, and then we will follow that the following year with the teacher evaluation system. You will have a lot of pushback, you'll have a lot of noise around that because people like the status quo, even though this evaluation system will give them way more money and will measure a teacher's quality of instruction as the biggest component of the evaluation system. Finally, 2 things. There's a lot of autonomy in this system, and that's been, Terry Greer put that in place, and there was a good reason for that. And it also did some good things. But autonomy without accountability is a recipe for status quo, low achievement, and not prioritizing resources. In other words, keeping the haves with the haves and the non-haves with the non-haves. And so you can't have an autonomous system without accountability or without prioritizing resources. I want to say again, this is not an attempt to take away from any of the schools that are doing well, okay? I've said that several times. I mean that, and you'll have to judge that when you see us actually go to school. And the money we're going to spend. Not one magnet school over here is going to lose a program. So what we're going to do is make sure that autonomy is earned or defined. Okay, that's That's what this is about. And then finally, vision is what's required. Of all the things that you want in a superintendent, it's leadership, vision, and making the tough decisions few others are prepared to make. That's what's required. This is about looking down the road to the year 2035. If you don't put stakes in the ground as to a possible future, then any path forward will do, and it's almost always the path you're on, which we have said over and over again is not going to close the achievement gap or get kids prepared. This district has zero chance of improving if it does the same thing over and over, and if it has no vision of the future. So year 2035 competencies is about that. It's about not just CTE. It's about art of thinking. It's about information literacy. It's about critical thinking. It's about problem solving. It's about learning how to learn. It's about dealing with AI. Those are things we also have to incorporate into the education of our kids, all of our kids, so that we don't leave anybody behind. Of course, I got to leave you with the movie quote. This is from Interstellar. When the robot says to Matthew McConaughey, it's not possible, when he was trying to dock his spaceship to this station that had been blown up, or at least part of it blown up. And he says, no, it's necessary. It's not impossible, but even if it were, we have to do what we need to do for our kids. It's necessary. The year 2035 is just around the corner for our kids. We don't have time. Kids are behind. Many kids in our high school are already so far behind. We're going to try to catch them up, but the truth is, it's going to be hard to do that. They can't wait 1 year for us to do serious things, bold things, to help them now, not a year from now, not 2 years from now, and certainly not 20 years from now. Who has the first question?
I appreciate the bold vision and the comprehensive nature of the plan. I want to ask you a question about pre-K. Can you tell us a little bit about the importance of pre-K to this plan and the outcomes that we're going to see over time?
Yes. We know that if kids have some language acquisition and some content knowledge, just a little bit, early on, before they get to school, we know that they'll be more successful and have a better chance of reading by third grade. That's in all the research. I don't have to tell you that. And so in HISD, we do have 8 centers, but it's not enough. And we do have, I think, 117 schools with pre-K programs. So that's a good thing. But guys, there's 273 schools, right? So, and not all of them are elementary. I think we have 160 or 170 elementary schools. So not all of our schools have pre-K. I asked today what percentage of the NES schools has pre-K, and it's, I think, 11 out of the 19. So 11 is good. So let's not call it a disaster. That's a good thing. But can we help the other schools provide pre-K for our parents? It's a complicated problem, so I'm not discounting it. For example, if you want pre-K in a school, you have to have a bathroom really close by. You have to have room enough. You have to have enough parents who want to bring their kids there, so that you at least have a classroom of 15, so forth and so on. So it's nuanced. But to answer your question, the more pre-K we can do, and the more we can do strong pre-K, not babysitting, the more we can do educational pre-K, the better our kids going to be able to navigate kindergarten first, and read by third grade.
Any other questions from the board? Ms. Linder?
One thing I wonder that I'd appreciate discussing is with the plan to incentivize teachers and attract the best teachers to our district and to our neediest classrooms first. What do you think about the how do I say this? What I'm interested in is exploring how that addresses the lack of, let's say, teacher diversity in our classrooms, and how many of our teachers, don't look like the children that they're teaching, and especially from a male-female ratio. It's I've read a lot about how important it is, to have male leadership and teachers in classrooms for our boys who are also struggling so much. So I'd appreciate understanding a little better what you envision around outcomes and increasing teacher diversity with this plan.
Yeah, I'm hoping over time that we will attract a diverse teacher population. Right now, we do have a teacher shortage. We have some vacancies, and I know that the principals have erred on the side of getting a teacher, and diversity hasn't been as high a priority. We can make it so. Over time, I think there's an assumption, and I think it's a good assumption, that our teachers of color will be as effective as any other group of teachers, and we're going to draw from surrounding areas and internally to staff the schools, first NES, but all the schools. So I think that the challenge for the first year is to attract people from outside the district and also from inside the district to serve all of our kids. And I think this is a long-term problem where we grow our diversity over time.
Any other questions from anybody on the board? Mr. Martinez.
So I have a question with regard, and again, it's about sustainability for me. So, example, let's hope Wheatley gets, a B rating over the next 2 to 3 years. At what point in Wheatley School or any school that is part of the NES, when does the financial support stop and the additional resources? Is that a continuum? They will continue, obviously, as long as you're here. Other administrations can make additional changes, but when do we stop or start?
Yeah, that's a great question. So once we put the NES system in place, that system stays the system. High quality curriculum, strong differentiated instruction, staffing model the way it is, evaluation system, higher salaries through the hospital model. The one thing that may change over time is the stipend to teach at an NES school. Right now, that stipend is $10,000 because of the tip of the spear that's really new. It's first time out of the chute, right, so to speak. So that stipend over time is going to decrease as we get more NES schools and it become a normal thing. But one of the things, and you may have read this about the ACE program, once the supports for ACE fell off, which should have never happened, once those supports went away, the student proficiency dropped. Not plummeted, but it did drop. So we have to be careful about that. But it's a system that we're putting into place, not a program. So we're going to keep the system.
Can I follow up real quick? Thank you for mentioning ACE. So I think that's probably part of the budget question I have as well, is that obviously one of the motivators for individuals, to your point, is financial, right? $10,000 stipend, which is great for any job. Are there any concerns, or I guess what are we implementing to ensure that quality teachers continue to be part of these NES schools and don't drop off because of the stipend?
Right. So you're asking all the right questions. The answer is you have to have a high salary, not based on stipends, right? So high-quality teachers are not just motivated by money, but there's no question that salary counts, okay? And we should be able to pay all of our teachers at some point $80,000 average salary within the next few years, but the NES schools Hopefully we can get them to 90,000 and then the rest of the district will catch up. We can do that without stipends and we will attract a lot of teachers. Can we today pay all of our teachers 90,000? No. But we could, if we were way more efficient, we could pay them $80,000 average salary. We can't do it overnight because it would mean changing the entire structure, which we are slowly doing. But over the next couple of years, and I don't want to pinpoint 3 years, but in the next 3 years or so, we will try to raise the average HISD salary for everybody, $80,000 average salary. Average salary. So some will be making more, some will be making less, but the average salary is $80,000. That is our goal. We can do it if we work much more efficiently, and we will.
Madam Chair, I have a question. Just kind of piggybacking off of Member Garza's comments and questions about diversity, I would really like to make sure, and I know that we've discussed this, about making sure that we had not only our teachers and principals and administrators to be able to speak languages that are spoken in those schools. I think that's really important, in particular when we want our parents involved, which I know we do, because that's important for the students, and to make sure that there's, for instance, in the wraparound services, that we have folks that speak the same language as the students, because that makes it incredibly difficult. So I just wanted to make sure that we keep that at the forefront when we're also recruiting.
Yeah, that's a great comment. One of the things we did in my last network is we ensured, and this was a requirement imposed by me, no matter what school we were in, because most of our schools had majority Hispanic, the office managers had to be bilingual, because that's the person who greets people at the door, who answers the problem, and then refers them to the right person. And so that was really important to do. I don't know if we can require that here, but that's the intent. That's the thought process, is to do what you're asking for, Trustee Mendoza.
Any other questions from the board? Yes, Ozanne Bandy.
Thank you, Superintendent, for the information you've provided in this presentation tonight. The Sunrise Centers are a huge, huge opportunity to support our students and families as they face challenges that, have a lot to do with our achievement gap and just the systemic things that we've seen go on and unanswered. So I'm looking at some of the details of that, and it looks like 1 in each division, 2 additional ones based on geographic need. It looks like we have a date of November 1st. And
yes,
so, 2023, this year. And then also need legal review to provide funds for collaboration with city and nonprofit organizations. So just wondering, it sounds like the plan is not fully fleshed out just yet. We have to go through legal review. So I'm wondering, just want to understand, what does that look like between now and November? Because, again, this is a huge opportunity for us.
Yeah, thank you for asking. Yes, it's what we want to do. We have to identify the centers. We have to work with the community members to make sure we're in the best place where there's other services. The reason why we have to go through legal review is we have to be sure we don't have a gift of public funds, meaning we can't just give money to community groups. It has to be channeled in a way where that money actually returns to our families, our kids. And there's ways to do it so that we're not just giving $2 million to this community, right? It has to come back to our kids. So we're okay if we pay utilities at a community center if that center serves our kids who are going there. You follow me? So we might pay for the utilities of a facility. We may add on to a facility and things like that. So that's why the legal review. But there's no question that we can help the community help us, and that's what the goal is. Does that make sense?
It does. Initially it sounded like it was going to be something that we did, so that's why I want. we meaning HISD, like we set up a center. So this is a collaboration with existing organizations.
Yeah, so we want to do what's called the force multiplier, right? We want to make sure that we take advantage of things that are already there. We don't need to supplant a community group doing good things for kids. We need to support them to do more good things for our kids, right? And so if we can co-locate, let's try to do that. If we have to build a wing to it and it doesn't cost that much money, or a few more offices, then we can do that. But I think the community is invested in our kids. There's several places around. There's a big city, and there's already communities doing great things for our kids and our families. So let's, if we can co-locate, we will.
Thank you for that, because again, kind of back to the pre-K conversation, and then, for me, even earlier than that, right, from 18 months on, it seems like we have a capacity issue. To your point, there have to be certain facilities, and by we, again, I mean HISD. So collaboration and co-location with existing facilities as far as expanding our pre-K and early childhood capacity, is that also something that we're exploring?
Yes, ma'am. That's exactly what we're trying to do. So if we know that there are a lot of facilities providing early childhood education, if we can support and have more kids, HISD Kids Serve, we can do that. I have to admit, I don't have all the information around all the early childhood that's happening outside of HISD. And so I'll find out more. We'll focus on both the expansion of the kids in our schools and in the early childhood, but collaboration with others outside who can help more kids, that's also important.
Any other questions from the board? Okay. Thank you, Superintendent. That concludes the Destination.
Thank you, board members.
Thank you. The Destination 2035 presentation and discussion. Next, we will consider the superintendent's agenda items. Board policy requires board members to abstain from all discussion and votes pertaining to contracts that might involve a conflict of interest. Board policy BBFA local defines a conflict of interest as any circumstance that could cast doubt on a board member's ability to act with total objectivity with regard to the district's interests. We will now consider items held for abstention and or discussion. Our first item held from the consent agenda is item number 2, approval of the 2023-2024 recommended budget. This item was held for discussion by board member Rolando Martinez. Mr. Martinez, you have the floor.
Thank you. So you answered some of the questions, Superintendent Miles, when you were giving the presentation. So there was one question that I had. The previous board had already recommended $25 million cuts from central office, and I think at the last presentation we mentioned $50 million. Is that in addition to, or is that $25 million, part of that 50?
Hello. So as I understand it, the last administration had proposed $15 million, and our proposal is $30 million. The $15 million comes from not counting vacancies mostly, and ours is not just vacancies, but also other cuts.
And then as a follow-up, I know we talked about reorganization in central office. Is there a plan as far as when we're going to do that and a time frame for that?
Yes, sir. Thanks for asking. We are doing it in a phased way. It won't feel phased for some folks, but for example, our operations office, custodians, nutritionists, bus drivers, no reorg is happening that I know of this summer. Wanda Paul may do some reorganization throughout the year, and we'll notify you of anything major, but I don't think there's anything major at this time. Partly because the buses are running. Food is being provided this summer. Custodians are cleaning the buildings and doing our gymnasium floors and all the other things that have to be done. So that is not being reorganized. We are, though, reorganizing some of the other central office functions like school leadership, chief academic office, and human relations, HR. We're trying to do that by the end of June, at least identifying the positions or people so that they have an opportunity to find jobs or to apply for other jobs within the district or elsewhere. We could have waited and dragged this out for another month, but then by the time we get to July, end of July, that doesn't seem fair to people. So that's why the rush right now.
One additional question, I think you answered it, but I just want to make sure that the community hears it. Wraparound specialists will remain for this year.
Wraparound specialists in the schools, I think there's one in every school, there are 274 of them, will remain in the schools this year.
Thank you.
May I have a motion on item number 2, approval of the 2023-2024 recommended budget?
Madam President, I move to approve this item.
Is there a second?
I second the motion.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion by any other board member related to this item? We will now vote on the motion to approve item number 2, approval of the 2023-2024 recommended budget. All in favor, please raise your hands. You may lower your hands. All opposed, please raise your hands. The motion passes. Our last item held from the consent agenda is item number 3, approval to temporarily suspend board policy EHBJ local, special programs, innovative and magnet programs. This item was held for discussion by board member Rolando Martinez. May I have a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve this item.
Do I have a second?
I second the motion.
I have a motion and a second. Mr. Martinez, do you have any items to discuss?
Yes, thank you again. So when it comes to magnet programs, I know this is a very important topic to our community members. It historically has been. So if my figures are correct, there's about 3,000 students that are currently enrolled in magnet programs in the NES schools. 20%, at least by policy, has to be out of zone. The question I would have is, are there any consequences of suspending this policy, whereas in the future we may need additional seats at other schools where we may need to bus additional students? Ideally, obviously, we don't want to bus students, but is that a possible consequence of this?
I don't believe so, because we're going to accommodate magnet programs in the NES schools. Not only are we going to accommodate the magnet programs in the NES schools, but we're going to provide for more experiences, more programs. Those of you who have looked closely at the Third Future Schools model, for example, know that not only do kids get an elective every day where most of the magnet programs sit in the NES schools, but on top of that, they get additional experiences. Things like photography, like martial arts, like dance, like violin, like any number of programs for kids. So kids will be able to do even more. But the answer to your question is we're going to provide those magnet programs. So I think out-of-zone folks who bring their kids to the NES schools magnet programs out of zone can continue to go there knowing that the programs, that the kids will get more. And by the way, we need to do more than a magnet program that has guitar and dance. That's important. We're going to keep that. And on top of that, we need to do more. When you look at some of the magnet schools in some of the areas of town, those schools offer way more programming, way more opportunities for kids. So one of the things we have to do in our NES schools, and not just NES is a start, right? We have to have equity of programming, but not just a little program here or there. Yes, it's going to take some time. There's nothing magic here. There's no magic wand. But you'll see right away that not only will we keep what we're doing, we're going to add to what we're doing, especially in the underserved communities.
And I want to follow up with that, if I may.
Yeah.
And so to your point, Superintendent Miles, it is an underserved community. When we see the magnet schools across the district, many of them are pretty much centralized in specific geographic areas. So my suggestion is, from a community perspective, is that in the future, as we develop, or if they are developing new magnet schools, that we consider this area where NES schools are, that we consider Southeast where limited magnet schools, that we consider Third Ward, that we consider other areas as we develop magnet schools.
Yes, sir.
Any other discussion, Ms. Ozanne Bandy?
So last week when we were talking about this and reviewing it, there were a few questions that we had that I know you said you wanted to talk to some of the principals this week, about specifics with their programs, what would continue, how we would enhance the programs, and just wondering how those conversations went, any feedback, any revelations that came out of those conversations this week?
Yes, so we asked all the principals, my staff did, to give more detail around the magnet programs. And again, once we had the principals identified, and I have information about that I can give the board later, we're going to sit down and make sure that the magnet programs are accommodated. And what I learned is that almost every program can be accommodated in the NES schools. So they gave a little bit more details, but it was about the number of hours, the time frame, the schedule, and again, there may be shifts in the schedule, but not shift in the programming. Meaning we'll still have dance, we'll still have guitar, we'll still have environmental science, we'll still have those sorts of things.
Thank you for that. And just a follow-up question, there's been some concern about who would be teaching these classes to our children and to our students in NES schools. And I know we talked about maybe contractors and things like that. How are we going to rate the performance even of our magnet programs, right? There's no STAR test for dance. There's no STAR test for guitar. How do we know that a magnet program, even photography and additional activities, meeting the needs of our students and giving them the exposure that they need?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So we rarely do anything, or we will rarely do anything without some sort of metric that says, this is a good photography class, this is a good dance class. If it says Chapter 21 teacher, certified teacher, that teacher will have what we call student learning objectives, goals that the teacher sets that are measurable. So let's say it's a dance teacher. So what is it, teacher, that you want your kids to learn and you can measure in 3 months and then 6 months? What is it? Is it the number of pirouettes? I'm not a dance teacher, obviously, but is it the number of different movements for modern dance? What is it exactly that you're going to teach the kids? Yeah, is it a routine is it choreographing a dance? Is that what you're going to do? Whatever it is, you have to set a goal for that, and we will measure it mid-year and end of semester, or at the quarter and at the end of the semester. And every teacher will have an SLO if they don't have a assessment like a STAR.
Any other questions from the board on this item number 3? Mr. Martinez?
So you mentioned contractors. Are these contractors in the building the entire day, or will there be assigned specific periods where they go in and out? Of course, with 10 and 9 employees, there's some restrictions there.
Yeah, we're hoping to take advantage of the expertise of people in the community. We know that the community is rich with experiences. Some are retired, some are part-time. So the answer to the question is some consultants, community consultants, will work 8 hours in a week. Some will work 20 hours in a week. We have what's called a dyad coordinator to coordinate this for our schools. And so I use the example of photographer, but I can use the example of a person who does martial arts, or a person who does dance, or a person who does fitness in the community. Many people teach, like piano teachers. Piano teachers teach kids after school or on weekends. That same piano teacher may be able to teach our kids during the day. And so we have contracted with piano teachers who have their own business. We have contracted with people who do fitness, health and fitness, who do spin class. We have contracted with photographers. We have contracted with people that have their own dojo, karate dojo, who during the day come and teach our kids. So it really depends on what's available in the community. It's been a great way, and it will be a great way for us to engage the community and for the community to be in our schools. Obviously, they'll be background checked and things like that. But I think it's a great community engagement, and everywhere we've been, the community loves this program. And usually the kids will say this is the part they like the best.
Sorry, one more question. You're absolutely right, Superintendent Miles. When I hear from the community, especially at the elementary age level, that is one of the motivators why they're going to school in addition to their teachers and their friends. With regard to evaluating these community members, will they be reporting to the principals or someone at central office? And then who gets to make determinations about hiring terminations with those particular subset of employees?
That's a great question. The answer is they can't be 1099 employees if you control what they do. What we have to do is make sure we have experts and professionals, a professional photographer, a professional karate person, a person who does karate, as part of their job. We bring those people in, and we observe them. We try not to do the same metrics, so they're not Chapter 21 employees. They're community consultants paid on a 1099. So by employment law, you can't tell them exactly how to do their job, otherwise they're not consultants, they're employees. So we will evaluate how they perform their function, and as long as they're teaching the kids the skills that we ask them to teach, meaning like photography, then they'll be okay. If they're not, it's a 1099. We don't need to bring them back the next day, and that's a call of the principal.
Any other questions on this item? We'll now vote on the motion to approve item number 3, approval to temporarily suspend board policy EHBJ local, special programs, innovative and magnet programs. All in favor, please raise your hand. You may lower your hands. All opposed, please raise your hand. The motion passes. We'll now vote to we are now ready to consider the remainder of tonight's agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the balance of tonight's agenda by consensus?
Madam President, I move.
Is there a second?
Motion.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll now vote on the motion to approve the balance of tonight's agenda by consensus. All in favor, please raise your hand. You may lower your hands. All opposed, please raise your hand. The motion passes. The next item on our agenda is consideration and approval of minutes from May 4th, May 11th, and May 18th, 2023 minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the board meetings held on May 4th, 11th, and 18th, 2023?
Madam President, I so move.
Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor of approving the May minutes, please raise your hand. You may lower your hands. All opposed, please raise your hand. The motion passes. The next item on our agenda is reports from the superintendent. Mr. Superintendent, do you have any additional reports for us at this time?
No, Madam President.
We're now ready to hear reports and comments from board members, and I'll speak first. Thank you all for attending. We appreciate your interest in the success of our students and in our district. As a board, we believe these meetings are a valuable opportunity for us to hear from individuals and for the community to be able to view the board at work. These meetings do not give us the opportunity to engage in meaningful dialogue with the community that we volunteered to serve. To that end, the board will spend the summer seeking out opportunities to learn more from families, from educators, and the greater HISD community. We plan to participate in the superintendent's family events, which will take place in July and August. These events will take place at campuses across the district, and families should sign up and submit their questions on the HISD website. These events start next week. Is that right, Mr. Miles?
Yes, ma'am.
So please go to the HISD website to check out the locations for those events. We'll be working to meet with each elected trustee in hopes of getting to know the unique perspectives of their trustee districts. And again, we appreciate the support of the trustees. We will meet with community organizations and leaders in July to help build a plan to engage the full community in August. And in August, we will launch our own series of events to hear directly from the community as we craft the goals and constraints that will set HISD on a path to better outcomes for our students. We look forward to seeing all of you and many more members of HISD's community over the summer. The board will now adjourn to closed session under Chapter 551 of Texas Government Code, Open Meetings Act, subsections 551.004 through 551.089. Should board action, vote, or decision on any matter considered in the closed session be required, such final vote, action, or decision shall be taken at open meeting, at the open meeting covered by this notice upon the reconvening of this public meeting or at a subsequent public meeting of the board upon notice thereof. The board has adjourned to closed session at 7:48 p.m. on this day, June 2nd, 2023.